We're here with Phill Smith. Go ahead and introduce yourself for anybody who doesn't know, been living under a rock.
Hi guys, my name's Phil. I'm a sort of magic inventor and designer here in the UK. So I design and invent magic for myself, for other professional magicians, for lots of amateur magicians around the world. And I'm one of, I think, a relatively small number of designers in magic who, yeah, like I kind of design magic. That's my that's my whole thing. So I thought I'd come on and we could chit chat about that, maybe.
Most definitely. I got a lot of questions for you. I'm a big fan of your work. I think I first discovered you around, I want to say the DMC Elites V4.
Yeah. So that was
Yeah.
a really popular project. So if people don't know, that was part of a series of marked decks that I released with Drummond Money Coops, DMC, who's a very good magician here in the UK, and I think he's in the Middle East, killing them over there now. So we did a really interesting project together. I think it picked up and got a lot of traction because it had a bunch of different things going for it, including a really nice, quite clever marking system called the OMS that we've played with for quite a long time.
Yeah, the optical marking system, right? Tell us more about that.
So traditionally, if people are familiar with mark cards, it's just that it says on the back of the cards in some way what's on the front of the cards, and of course, as a magician, that gives you a lot of power and a lot of control over your performances. So the origin of them is from gambling games. So people were playing poker with some subtle hidden marks on the back. So in magic, we for quite a long time had kind of like the hand-me-downs from that slightly nefarious cheating industry, and the marks were extraordinarily well hidden and they needed a lot of decoding and quite a long time to read. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and thought, how could we, given that we're going to be creating the whole project from scratch, create a card with a pattern that would afford a marking that could be read very quickly and that was hidden in kind of like a different way. So it's almost like an optical illusion, the way that it works. And I think that it made, the reason why I like performing with them is it takes a little bit of the risk out of doing magic, even if you're not using them for the main method. If you're not doing a trick that uses the marks in any way, if you get to the end of a trick, often you have to build up a lot of momentum and be like, so this card here, no one's touched it from the beginning, and you're thinking of the four of spades, so you have to build this big moment up, but you're quite exposed, because if you turn that card over and it's not the four of spades, you look like a bit of an idiot. But of course, with our system, even if you've not got to that point using any of the hidden information, you can always just check. So it gives you like a lot more. I like backups and things like that. So it made like performing quite difficult magic a little bit easier, which I'm a big fan of things like that.
Now this system, I absolutely love that you can see the cards from a spread. Like I told you, I'm a big fan of your work here. But right now you have the Elysian Duet playing cards, which is like the first, I think, playing card review that I did on my channel here.
Oh,
And
okay, that's cool.
I love them. And I hear you might have something new coming out.
Well, what we've done is, because you mentioned it was the version 4 of the DMC Elites that you came in at. A lot of people have used these cards, and I've been able to talk to a lot of people. And rather than doing what I think is most common, is to produce a product and then develop material with the product or work with that product, we've been able to like reiterate and go back and build in all of the things that people have asked for. And so over a period of time, we've gradually added more and more in. So almost like a Swiss Army knife. I was talking to somebody this session, and that's how we were talking about it. So it's got a lot of additional features in addition to just regular markings that integrate things like Juan Tamaritz is very well known. There we go. Oh, so beautiful. A gentleman of taste and distinction, clearly. But we've
Definitely.
incorporated mnemonic. And again, it's a case of trying to make things that are very complicated in magic more accessible and more usable. So I've never really had much luck with mnemonic. You could probably, if you get your magnifying glass out, this book just here is, I think, one of the memory arts books by Sarah Hellephant, and we've spent a lot of time. I've spent a lot of time. Yeah,
Got it
it's
up
great.
there.
It's really clever.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I just can't get it to stick, and I definitely can't get it to stick to
Man,
a
let
point
me
where I
tell
need
you.
to be very fluid performing.
It took me about 2.5 years to memorize the entire stack. So it took me quite a while. And I actually just got this book recently, and I just bought it because my daughter is starting to get into Magic a little bit. She's only 6, or right now, but I'm
So you
starting to. She's already got the first 5 cards memorized, so she's doing pretty
going to
good.
say you want to start early now? Yeah, get that
Yeah,
in
you might
there.
as well. But one of the things that I loved about this deck when it came out, it really helped me in terms of not only being a usable deck for mentalism and magic, but also being like a set of flashcards because they are so visible and easy to read. um even at a distance, I've heard people that have eyesight problems can view these cards pretty
Yeah,
easily, which is a great benefit. But not only that, they're just great flashcards in general. If you don't feel like getting a regular deck of cards, writing on them, and you want something you can actually use in performance and also double as that flashcard, I am big champion of that because they're awesome for that.
you're kind of sort of a bit of a safety net, isn't it? For like
It
as I
is,
was trying to
yeah,
learn the
yeah,
moniker, and I've kind of given up on it. But I've managed to kind of like teach the deck mnemonic, so the deck knows, and that lets you do not everything that you can do using like just regular mnemonica that you've got locked inside your brain, but it lets you do a lot of what's there and explore that kind of space to see
yeah.
maybe whether it's something you're interested in learning the full thing. But you mentioned the V4 Elites, which I think was probably, I think it was the green ones. That was one of the last ones that we did. There we go. That didn't have all of the mnemonicas stuff and the extra
Right,
bits and pieces built into it. And so people have often said like, oh, they don't use mnemonica. Maybe they use Aronson or the Optilin stack or something else, or they don't want to
right.
use a stack and they find it annoying that it's got it kind of built in. I've always said just don't look at the part of it that explains the stack. You could just ignore it.
Right.
But
It
I
can
understand
still
what
be
people
used
say.
as a regular marked deck, which is perfect. Yeah.
But
If you ever get out of order, shuffled up, or anything like
yeah,
that, it can still be used as normal.
of course. But I started thinking if people genuinely don't use those things, those extra details that are on the back of the card become a compromise that diminishes how effective it is for what they're using it for. Because
Right.
they take up space, they minutely increase the risk of exposure to people who perhaps it could catch their eye or something. I don't think that happens very often, but it's not impossible.
I don't
Um,
think so neither, but I see exactly what you're saying. I've heard people
I've had a
mention
few
things
people
like
say
that. Yeah.
it'll be like kids will spot it because they're not used to their brains
Uh,
don't write out as much noise as an adult does. They don't filter quite as much, and that's kind of how the system works.
I mean,
So I've kind of
speaking of that, any magician that performs for kids, God bless them, because kids are a tough audience for
yeah, for
sure.
sure.
Kids are a tough audience. They are brutally honest. That's for sure.
Yeah, I remember like when I was a kid, I was the little horrible kid who was like, I can see that. Like, like looking back now, I'm like, wow, what a nightmare. But I tried my best. I feel like I've made up for it. So if I thought like, what if we didn't have that information that's on the back of the cards? What if we had, uh, you know, just the marks expressed as visibly and kind of invisibly as possible. If it was that was the product, what's the best execution of it for someone who's got limited eyesight? So kind of redone, and I've got like one prototype deck which came the other day, which is the that we're calling it with the
Oh,
Elysian
nice.
Duet Allegro. You'll
Yes.
notice it's green,
Green. I
um,
love it.
and it's got the OMS system kind of reconceived from the beginning, and so it's got about 30 to 40% larger markings on it, which means that your range for being able to see it is much larger.
Right.
We're still like part of my system for coming up with this stuff is getting these prototypes done, like so we have a short one with the decks done, and then looking at it and trying to use it in as many situations as I can to then inform the next step of the design. So the plan is that we're going to do a last phase of revisions on this and then do a Kickstarter, hopefully soon, so that we can like get these
Okay.
moving.
Nice.
Can I show
Yeah.
you? Can I show you this? I haven't really talked to anybody about this yet, apart from
Please,
people.
please, please.
So let me
Dying to see
just
them.
get a regular duets just here. What have we got there? Yeah. So we've got this is a regular like current duets, like the ones that you've got, obviously, except blue. So we've got six of spades there. So that information is on the back. If you've not seen these before, you kind of just have to take my word for it. But it's about that big on the back, and people can, you know, if you know how to read these, you can read it from that, I'm sure, on the screen. But by going back to the drawing board and ignoring the restrictions of having to have the smaller marks to fit everything else in, because it's a very dense information. We've got this, which is the newer system. So this is the three of hearts. I was looking at it then like it was difficult, although I'm already looking at it.
It's hard to see on camera. Yeah.
It's a little bit tricky, and the three is one of the numbers that needs a little bit of tweaking to reduce some of the repeated shapes, which I think is part of what catches people's eye if they've not used to seeing it before, and to sort of make it as easy as possible to spot. But instead of being this is such a bad explanation. Instead of being that big, it's that big.
Okay. Yeah. See. Yeah, I can see how much larger it is.
Yeah. So you've
But
got
still, they can still be read from the spread, though.
Yeah. The overall marks here are that big. The overall marks here are that big. So it's almost half the card, and that's because there's nothing else on there. It's all it's got is what the card is, and it's got a bit of the standard one weighing because it doesn't take up any extra space, and we've got the other features on the faces that we've used before. And I think that it gives it that, like, the extra range means that it's going to be easier to read from a longer distance because it's just physically larger. You'll be able to more quickly read it because that target acquisition is easy when the target is larger. That's what's that called? Law of Pragnatz or something like that. It's just like a design concept. And it will also mean that you're going to be able to read it in lower light because it's got more information per, you know, sort of area of your eye that it subdivides.
That has always been a problem when it comes to this material. Yeah.
And people who've got like terrible eyesight are it's going to be easy for them to deal with. So again, it's an exchange. So rather than having all of the like clever features that the current OS have got, it's like if we exchange those for just the standard system, what will that allow? What extra things does that allow? And I think that the thing that's going to be the most like magical in terms of you being able to build a routine that people can't explain very easily, what this does is gives you that extra range. You should be able to stand far enough away that it doesn't make sense that you could read a mark from that range, because what people are thinking about, maybe the marks on the card are going to be like these little tiny minute things like on the gambling cards from yesteryear, whereas this is the exact opposite, which is the, you know, you can read it from quite a long way away. So that's another, so it's that like the exchange between more features or more like easier, simple use. It's an interesting project to put together. I always like these kind of things. You can tell that I'm thinking about it a bit too much.
If you were to compare that to some of the other markings, I mean, that's the size difference is tremendous.
I think probably the only thing that would be close, there's a few things like the Daredevil deck, which is it's got a very, very large marking on the back. But again, the compromise with that is that you've got a comparable, extremely long range.
Right.
But it's more, I wouldn't want to, if somebody said, are those cards marked? You're not going to put them in their hands.
Right. I think that's definitely good for like a parlor stage setting, but like close up, it's a little bit too visible.
But again, it's the compromise allows you that extremely fast. It's it's designed not as a curio, but as like if you are on stage doing magic, it's a great solution to that. And so I think that this is somewhere in between in terms of readability, that there's no decoding. I'm pretty confident you could give this to somebody to handle.
I know that for a fact. I've done it. You know. Yeah, I know that for a fact. The only other one I could think of is probably be like this the blurred deck. It has like really big markings besides the Daredevil deck.
Yeah,
and
that's very
it's kind of like a similar concept, but they're also really hard to see. A little bit easier to see on camera, depending on.
It compresses the lines, doesn't it? That's one of the ones when I saw that the first time.
Yeah,
I thought, I wish I thought of that.
It says blurred, and it really does kind of like hurt my eyes looking at them, though. You know.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, but so you said you're going to do a Kickstarter. Do you know around what time this is going to start, or?
I might get that moving in time for Blackpool. So that's the
Okay, nice.
yeah. So maybe
Great
18th or
idea.
19th of February. So because we won't have any like stock obviously, but I can have
Right.
this, and I can get some little leaflets done and stuff. So I can I can hustle people at Blackpool.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I know I'm getting a pair.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
thank you, dude. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I got plenty of your decks here, that's for sure. I'm gonna have to stock up. So I want to ask you, because I usually ask everybody this type of question. What inspired you to get into magic? How did you get into magic? I know you said when you were younger, you were one of those terrible kids pointing out the magic tricks, but what sparked
yeah.
that love initially for magic?
Well, we had a like a magic book in the house when I was a kid. It was just a book of card tricks by um, Garcia, and it was just kind of like in my mind. It was kind of iconic. It was just a book of card tricks. So me and my brother learned things like the false shuffles and like a stack of these tricks, and it was all from a regular shuffle deck. So a lot of my like mindset about how to do magic always tends towards that, weirdly, given that I kind of like make all of these unusual things. That a lot of it originally was based on like what's the absolute minimal sort of props or item that you can use to create something. But that's what it was when I was at school. I used to like do card magic and like mark decks of Waddingtons with a compass. And then when I went to university or to college in Leicester, which is a town near here, there was a magic society in the town that I ended up joining, and that kind of was the first time I interacted with like the real world of magic. So that was you can imagine like a million years ago. But there was some really great guys there at this magic club, people that I still sort of keep in touch with, that I'm good friends with, and who very much inspired me by kind of showing me what is possible when somebody becomes good at magic, not just like learns a
Right.
few tricks, but who sort of like studied magic, practiced magic, got good at it. 1 sec. Sorry about that. My phone's ringing. Right, there we go.
It's all right. Yeah, there's
Um,
definitely a lot more to it than just doing tricks, that's for sure. When you start learning a little bit about theory and psychology behind it, uh, there's so much more to it than when we
yeah.
first get into it initially, what we're thinking. There's way, way more.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, even if you never dip into the sort of the real deep nerd stuff in magic, just the mindset that when you perform a card trick, that you perform a card trick, you don't just do a card trick. You don't just get the
Right.
cards out and be like, right, shuffle those, deal down 3 piles. You perform it. You theatre. You create. So even when we used to go out and do like a charity close up, and they were the first real gigs that I did, where I was performing for a normal person who had perhaps paid to go to the event that I was performing at, and that you've got to hold their attention. There's a way to work the crowd, and it's not necessarily particularly deep theory a lot of the time. It's just that initial mindset of being that what is there that I can do that can elevate what I'm doing. I very vividly remember having a conversation at one of these, the first one I went to, where I could see like these guys who are real magicians are engaging with the people and getting responses that are completely different from what I'm doing. It's not hitting. And I had a conversation with a guy called Clive Wilkins, who was a sort of a slightly spooky, tall English mentalist. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? Like, he wasn't like terrible, but it wasn't what everyone else was doing. And he gave me some like advice, which was about, it was like emergency triage, fix your magic in the next 10 minutes. And it was like, you've got to be bigger, just to like elevate what you're doing to a larger scale. Take your own personality and just do like 200% version of that. So you're not being a character. And it was great because it was like,
Right.
it genuinely, like I went back and did the next table, and I wasn't like an amazing magician, but I was louder and more vivid and moved around a bit more. And they were like, something's happening at least.
I've actually heard something similar to that before. I've heard
Yeah.
something very similar to that before. If you don't want to build a whole different character outside of who you are, just elevate, bring out the character of who you are already.
Yeah.
I think that's good advice.
I have worked a lot on that idea and the theory of like building character, building premises, this idea of like, what is it that you're doing? What is the magic that you're doing? What's the source of it? What's your power? How does it like come to be? Because that informs your performance and it allows you to create more of a theatrical moment. But yeah, I mean, like without spending them like ages and ages and ages and going ultra deep, that piece of like little grenade of knowledge that was thrown my way by Clive like all those years ago really kind of like pulled me out of the fire a bit. I think it's and kind of it's ended up coming full circle because although I've built a lot of different like premises and characters and everything along the way in terms of how I perform, the version that I perform now is kind of just like the real version of me turned up to 200%.
Yeah, I
So
like
that
that.
little got all the way back round to where I started.
So let me ask you this: How does one go from performing, and being a magician and starting to get gigs to actually designing? What is the process from, being a performer, being a magician to actually starting to get into designing? What kind of schooling did you have to go into? How did you
Well,
how
I
did
mean,
you initially get into it? What was the first decks that you started designing?
I've been a bit like a commercial designer. Was like that's my background more than a magician. So I've done a lot more design gigs than I've done magic gigs. That's for sure. Um, and it started working on. I think the first time I ever did anything that was kind of a cross between magic and doing design was when I started doing design for my own books because I'd written a load of ideas down. And I just at the time, print on demand was coming in, and I'd been to uni, joined the Magic Society, and I knew how to do it. So I was able to put these together. And I think that other people saw that, and then I know a lot of people in Magic, and then when they were working on their projects, they were like, "Phil knows how to do that." So it kind of that was the first time that I like started working doing design for magicians. So I did a lot of promotional stuff as well. So leaflets and business cards and posters and stuff like that for local guys. And then in terms of actually design to create tricks and playing cards, probably the first one that I did was a trick that I did through Kickstarter called the Creative Solutions deck. And it was a word deck with a particular premise attached to it. And it had a kind of prototype version, a embryonic version of what is now the optical marking system. Yeah, and so that was quite a long time ago. And that was a Kickstarter. It must have been 11, 12 years ago, something like that. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so then again, now that I've done that, people who were looking for projects in terms of designing playing cards started coming and asking if I could help them with that. And it's like 50% of it is knowing some like clever design feature, and then the other 50% is just having done enough decks that I know how to do it. And there's not going to be, when you send it off to print, you're not rolling the dice quite as much because not the first time that I've done it before. Because there's a lot of pitfalls, obviously, with something like that. It's it could be a very complicated project with a lot of moving parts, even though it seems like it's relatively simple. So having done it a few times, people increasingly see, that I've done it, so that they can trust that it's not going to be a disaster.
I mean, I can only imagine, but having to, design every card one by one specifically, make sure that they all look similar enough. That's got to be a crazy process to go through, right?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Is that a lot of the time, I've talked quite a bit about this in the past. That it's my trick is being able to build a workflow for doing that. I think that marked cards. I think I've designed probably more marked cards than anyone else. Just not like that's some grand calling. That's like 12, something like that. I've probably done a few more than that, but having built a system now and having an effective way to do it means that I can do things like prototypes, make changes, and see those rolled through. And there's a certain amount of automation between the projects that allows me to build very complicated things. So like I've done a bunch of things for Craig Petty, where I've developed a way to mark words onto playing cards, like the Evoke deck.
Right.
And so that becomes like monstrously complicated, because rather than just having each of the cards with 6 of hearts or 6H or whatever, you've got to be able to pull all of this information in technically, and then create markings for each letter, and then make sure everything's allocated properly. So there's quite a complicated technical back end of it. I'm not sure how many other people have been bothered to work out.
Yeah, I can't even fathom it. It's crazy.
But the process of doing that is because look, I mean, you can see that I'm quite old. I've been doing design for like a long time, and I've just like figured a lot of this stuff out. You'll get there, but you'll get there. Just need to have more stressful kids. And,
like I got one stressful enough. That's where I got all the grades so far.
Yeah. So that's quite interesting. And that, like, over the the last few years of having built this, I think quite a reliable process from what I've developed ways to work on my own projects, and then developed ways to work on other people's projects. So like I worked on a bunch of stuff for Murphy's and Penguin and Craig Petty's various projects, and I've worked out a good workflow for that. And that's why I started doing this like atelier thing, which is a way to allow me to like produce projects that would be like a commercial level, but for individual people. So I have this thing that I started last year called Atelier Arcana, and it's basically a way for people who are interested in having like their own tricks, but don't want to have to pay all of the money to get it commercially developed, because like it's quite complicated, it's quite expensive. And that's been quite successful. I've been able to work on some projects with people that are like ultra personal and create magic that wouldn't be possible working through like my projects or through Murphy's projects. So I did a project for a guy in the US that was a kind of almost like a forcing book, and then a bunch of picture revelation images. And so there's these 3 images that look like just regular images, and then when you bring them together, elements in the images spell out a word. But because of the way that we were able to work, because it was a very personal project, the book is a book of his like photographs of him through his life as a child with his family. And these 3 images are photos of him as a child, with him and his brother and his friends and his family. And so he performs this, and his mum sees it, and she took these pictures, and of course we've been in and like edited them and changed them around, and it's this very personal piece of magic, and it uses a method I perhaps wouldn't have thought of, because it'd be something that fits in with how he performs. And so that's been really interesting, working like that, and again, like refining down a workflow so that I can try and figure out what somebody wants in terms of their like props and how the trick is going to work in performance. That's been great, really interesting, slightly new way of doing it, I think, as well, so that it's not just for commercial release, because that's, I think, normally how a lot of stuff is built.
I can see something like that hitting really emotionally hard, especially for her being, taking those photographs and, throughout the years. And that's crazy.
I think that as well for him, in terms of performing it, that, we're all natural communicators. All behavior is communication. And when he's on stage, no matter how cool and how like poker face he is, people are going to be able to read some of his emotions. And when he's putting pictures up that are personal to him, and there is a personal story to them,
right,
then they're going to see it. They're going to see that it means something beyond, just revealing a bunch of playing cards. It's something, more emotional and more immediate. That's, that's the kind of thing that I love to get involved with. Yeah.
So how would somebody get in contact with you if they want to hire you for, either working on a deck or, have something similar to what you did for him, design wise? How would they contact you? And
it's always been something that I've done, that's how, but it comes through people that I know and all of this stuff behind the scenes in the industry. So I decided to make it essentially like a product on my website. So this service that we do is all broken down. My website is phillsmithcreative.com. Since you asked, I have to now hit you with the hard stuff. And there's a product that's on there called Atelier Arcana. And so that's this like multi-tier way of doing this, so somebody can, you know, have a product produced or like a trick produced, and I can develop that and work with them, and it kind of explains how it works. Because things like, I do a lot of design for people like Luch, for example, is a mentalist over here in the UK, produces these fantastic products. And a lot of the time when he's working on the products, and I'll do the design work with him, we liaise on that, it's because he wants that as a thing for him to perform, and he's developed it. He wants to perform it for his shows. But the only way that it can make sense to do the production is to have it as a commercial thing as well for other people. But if you don't want to do that, then this is an option for that. But that's been quite fun over the last year, and it's given me a new way to attack these projects, and sort of a new a bit more mojo in terms of them being sort of exciting and quite personal.
What are some notable decks that you've been involved with in the development, or decks that you've come up with yourself that you are especially either proud of, or was just a great experience working on?
Yeah, so I think probably the one that I was most pleased with was I struggle to remember what the name of it now is. It was like a Lego deck that I developed with Craig. And again, this was
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar.
Bricks. Mind Blocks. It was called Mind Blocks.
Okay.
He thinks like it was all a million years ago. And that was quite interesting because I had to develop a set of images as well for these Lego things. I got like a quite clever graphics way of doing that. And then it used another, like a very different kind of optical illusion to hide the text on the back. And in the back is this like slightly abstracted pattern of all of these little Lego blocks. And the way that your brain works and your eye works is it reads the blocks themselves. So the blocks are the shape, and the background is just the background. But what I did with that was to build the text into the negative shape around the blocks. So you can't decode the blocks.
Okay.
And you have to mentally switch, like a little context switch in your brain, to perceive the negative space. So it was just again, it's just like a design trick, and it kind of came together that it was possible with the Lego shapes that they afforded. It was just like lots of different little elements and features all came at the right time, and it just ended up being a really nice little thing. And Ryland used it on, I want to say, America's Got Talent, when he was doing his run through there, and he had like a special bespoke version that allowed him to control the outcome to be something that doesn't happen in the trick that you bought off the shelf. So that was great to see that happening, people performing it out in the real world, Ryland performing it on TV on a big stage.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a fun project to work on. And again, part of that as well was trying to work out the technical method to be able to do the production of the cards, the actual physical, the technical side of building the images of the text. Just ludicrous, like deep nerd stuff, but every time you do something like that, you figure out a new technique. So then the next time you're building something like that, you're not working from there. Right. You're working from there. You climb a little bit more each time, and you gradually.
Speaking of that, walk me through the development of the optical marking system all the way to where you are now with it. Because I know one of the decks that I remember, I've actually, because I collect playing cards too, but one of the decks I wanted to get was the is it the Great Sharks, the DMC
the Great
Sharks?
Whites. Yeah.
The Great Whites, yes, okay.
That was the first time that optical system came about.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah. I'd done this deck for Drum and Money Coots, for he did a TV show called The Card Shark. And we did like a hero deck for that, which was just a shark like swimming through a cloud of playing cards, spiting them on the back. And it was quite a sort of Theory 11 kind of thing from back in the day, like that particular aesthetic. And I kind of just had this idea from looking at this Creative Solutions deck that I'd done in the past, that it would be possible to do, and was just felt like that there was a way of doing a marked deck. So I talked to Drummond about it, and we had this idea that we could extend this sort of shark visual and do a test deck, of this this marking system. So it was like, look, in a way, looking back, it's a lot simpler and a lot more like undeveloped compared to how it is now. But that's just because it was the first, it was the first stamp. And I went to Blackpool that year. I think it was one of the first times I'd gone, and I wasn't trading, but I had a few of these decks, and it was just really nice showing them to people, and then being like, you can see the gears going round, that they're like, I can do something with this. This would make this problem easier. I would be able to do this trick by adding this extra feature, and it makes it impossible to backward engineer. And so that's, like, rather than just developing things yourself, coming up with tools that other people can use to create things that they, can express some part of themselves. Yeah, it's an interesting aspect of it.
So from that point of the Great Whites, which is a really cool looking deck, where did the development go from there? Did you directly go into like the DMCs, or was there a process in between that? How'd that all work out?
I don't know that I would be able to remember exactly what order the decks came in, but we kind of like, we sold a bunch of them, and then you talk to the people who use them, and everybody's always got an idea. Oh, why don't you do this? So why isn't it marked in all four corners? Didn't have a good answer to that, so we had to do it. Or then, why is this not like that? Why didn't you do this? Some of them you just like, that's not a great idea. Some of them you try and they don't really work out. Some of those details or those features like really work. So we then integrated them. And it's just been a case of just lucky enough to have had people, like, it's just something that I think is universal enough, like a marked deck, that people were interested in it. And we kept getting to like circle back round and look at ways to improve it. And eventually I think that it's kind of, it's quite a refined solution to that problem of wanting to know what's on the other side of the playing card. Yeah. Like, yeah, I've got a little bit lost in the grand importance of it. It's just like a really nice mark deck, and we got a chance to like make it more precise over time. Yeah, that's it.
I see. Okay. Now, something I have been wanting to ask, and you can kind of skip this question if you'd like, or be extremely vague. But after the DMC V5s, which was the kind of the mnemonic version, right, of the DMCs. Um, why was the design switched over, or should I say, why did he move to a different design for the DMCs and not continue?
Yeah, we ended up working on different things. So we did a few projects which were like non-magic cards. So we produced a game called Zilch, which was a really nice sort of word game, great word game actually. I think it's still on Amazon. The Drummond wanted to work more on that, and he was working more in like Dubai and the Emirates and stuff like that. And I was still keen to work on like things within Magic, and I was doing more and more projects for other people. So we just kind of like decoupled our efforts, and so I carried on working on my bit, and he carried on working on his bit. And I think that the aesthetic that he's developed by keeping the elements that were associated with his brand has been really interesting, and it's nice to see that there are other ways of approaching it other than the way that I did. And I think that's probably part of the story as well.
To be completely honest, I didn't like them at first. They started to grow on me a little bit. I don't know, maybe I had that bias because I like this other system so much. But they started to grow on me a little bit. I've had a couple other magicians not be able to see the markings, but I saw them clear as day. I thought maybe they were a little bit too out there, too bright, or too easy to see. But at the same time, other people not able to see them at all. So I've never had any issues like that. They did grow on me a little bit, that's for sure. But
I think
I'll be sticking with the Elysian duets though.
I think what makes a lot of those things is the attitude that you have as well. As long as it doesn't have to be perfect, but
yes,
like a lot of old systems, because they used coding to do the mark, you run the risk of like you'd be performing and have to be like
staring. Yeah, don't
just
stare.
look for a little bit longer than all it takes is just am convinced of this, so that a spectator doesn't have to necessarily consciously understand what has happened, or even register that you were looking at it for an extra little bit longer. But it just adds a beat in the wrong place in the performance. And then when they come back and think about it later on, it's just not necessarily they remember that moment, but that there's a sense of that what they experienced doesn't match exactly with what your performance should have been.
Right.
And that,
I completely agree with you.
But it's an attitude thing, I think, more than anything. That if you got really good at reading like any mark deck, even the ones that are like we said before, the Daredevil, there's a way of doing it that will watch. There is a way of handing it to someone, and they won't
I
spot
agree.
it.
Yeah. I sort of think about it, and you know, opinions may differ, but I think a good rule of thumb is, you know, whatever deck you're going to use, try to be able to read efficiently within like 3 seconds. And don't just look at it. I sort of think of if you were going to peek a card that wasn't, you know, a marked deck, you're peeking. So you use a peek for the top of the card the same way you would use a peek for, you know,
Yeah.
peeking the middle or whatever. So just kind of peek. I mean, Luke Jemay has you know, some pretty good work on that that I think is phenomenal.
Part of it as well is this. There's an element of the the physical act of seeing and reading it that you have to you know, you've got a bunch of noise, and you know that in this very specific part of the noise there is a signal that you can decode, and when you look down at the card, your eye has to find that signal. And so I used to do this, like this thing when I know that I'm going to look down at the cards. So I know I can sort of see it in the corner of my eye down there. That in my head, I kind of like mentally. This is so niche as an idea, but like pre-think where I'm going to look. Like if you were going to, you know, somebody serving you a tennis ball, you kind of got in mind exactly how you're going to return it. That you kind of have in mind, not to just look and then find it, but to know where you're going to look on the card, so that you can reduce down that acquisition time. And by doing loads and loads of little bits and pieces like that, like drilling the cards as well, so you can get super fast with them.
Yeah,
you
definitely.
you can get that like ultra fast read, because you've
Yeah.
kind of eliminated or shifted the time of when you're doing certain parts of the physical action of that. Yeah, that's too nerdy. That's too niche. Just look at it. It's just like
No, it's not. No, it's not. That's great advice, because I completely agree with you. Like I said, no matter what deck you're using, you're gonna have to practice with it. You're gonna have to drill, and you know, if you get accustomed to it to a certain point where you can read it within seconds, you're in a good space.
I used to do that when I used to use cribs a lot when I was doing mentalism, because it's a really interesting way of like containing information and having like apparent access to it, like you've memorized it, but by putting it in the environment. But again, you can densely pack information, and I would do things where I'd have like a block of like 50 numbers with a word next to it, and it'd be from a book test or something. But like you don't want to be going like, I know that it's number 37, so I'm going to look and go through them until I get to number 37.
Right.
You have to have like a mental approach to doing it, to be in like, they're in 2 5x5 blocks or 2 5-letter word blocks. So that's the first 10, that's the second, so it's the third, and then it's the fourth, so that's going to be the 30 to 40. So you know it's going to be in the second one, and so you mentally like figure out the exact position of where the item is going to be on the crib before you look at the crib. So as you're sort of like, you could be talking to somebody, and in the breaks between, you know, when you need to be focused on what you're saying, you can line that information up, which means that you can then do the crib peak like ultra fast. And I think it's that same kind of approach.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, because it's like mnemonica too. If you know, if you've got it memorized, you can kind of, you know, somebody names a card, and you can cut close enough to it just by knowing where it's at. It's that estimation. And then if you have something like the Elysian Duets or any other mark deck out there, you can see, okay, I'm this close, and it's a lot of jazz that goes into it, right? A lot of jazz work, but yeah, I just
That
love
reminds
that.
me of kind of just pronounce his name wrong. Think Nguyen, who is an incredible magician. and he had a deck that I worked on, which was a deck in mnemonica, and it only had marked on it the mnemonica number because he was
Love
so
that.
familiar with mnemonica. And it was just kind of like I don't know if it was like a flex or something, but he was one of the most incredible magicians I've seen, just an incredible card guy. And he did huge amounts of work on estimation. And it's just so inaccessible to my brain. But he could do like ludicrous stuff with these sort of super pared down tool of this deck marked with just mnemonica. Does my annoying. Would never be able to do that. But fascinating that somebody's elevated, what they're working on to that tier.
I actually, I just came out with a, not to plug my own stuff or anything, but I came out with a little booklet. It's
What's your YouTube channel?
marking a deck with just the position numbers.
Oh, yeah,
people already have it memorized, and just different versions of that. It's like 3 different versions, and it's the same type of concept there. And I like it because you can hide the numbers. People are thinking, even other magicians are thinking they're looking for a 2 of clubs. They're looking for a 2C, or or actual picture of a club on the card. Nobody's thinking of looking for a number. So it's a great.
The phrase that I always use with those is that they're cognitively primed to see the playing card because they're looking at playing cards. So without realizing it, that their head is filled with those, like that terminology, so that their filter is less focused on that. They were more able to see it. So I thought that was really smart with this Think for Think and this obviously your deck approach.
That's a good point too. Spectators aren't used to seeing playing cards as much as we are. That's something we got to keep in mind, because I feel like there's a lot of people out there that are afraid to use these decks simply because they're afraid of getting caught. And really, in real life performance, it's not like that.
Yeah, I think that once you've done it a few times, you get like I remember that having like when I was doing these close-ups with the Leicester Magic Circle at these like round table nights, getting this sense of suddenly realizing you could kind of like perceive the focus of the audience at a table. So think of like a table with 8 people. You kind of somehow get like a bit of a sense about what they have and haven't seen. And like sometimes you could be in the middle of something and maybe flash something over here and register that person has seen it, even though they don't go, "Oh, I saw that," but you just know, just from them, like there's like a relaxation in the tension in their body, or like that their focus shifts away from where it was. They look at someone else to see whether they've seen it. Did you see what I saw? And they can tell that they haven't because they're still like. And that's part of what I was talking about that there's a lot of stuff that you can't really get just out of a book. Completely lost track of where I was going with it. There was nothing really, was it? But part of once you've been using, I think it was once you've been using marked decks for a while, you could tell that people aren't seeing it. You get to the end of the trick and they're impressed. You think, you must not have seen what I was looking at the whole time. Yeah.
Which in my case, I've never been called out for it. So maybe I'm doing something right, or I think a lot of audiences are not even aware of the existence of marked cards. There's some, don't get me wrong, but the majority of them don't even know that exists.
I think it's their idea is that it is. If anybody knows about any gaff decks, they know about marked decks. So I think that you are sometimes behind the 8 ball a bit on that, because if they're going to find an explanation, I think everybody who does a lot of card tricks will have had at some point somebody be like, "Oh, I bet you're using a marked deck," and you're like, "I just produced 4 aces. It doesn't explain anything." So but quite often, but that's the only explanation they have. They'll reach for like, "I don't know what happened. What have I heard of? Marked deck. Yeah, there you
go." That is funny because I've had that. That's crazy, and it's usually other magicians you're performing for. It'd be something like really ridiculous. Has nothing to do with the method.
Sorry.
It'd be something ridiculous that has nothing to do with the actual method.
Oh God, who was it on? There's a mentalism forum that I used to be on back in the days of like Yahoo groups. It's like, God, it must be like 25 years ago or something like that. Like proper old-fashioned forums. And there was a dude on there who had a story of he'd gone to a magic show, and there was a guy in front of him in the audience with his girlfriend who'd gone on a date. Like, obviously, he's trying to show her how clever he is, and he's leaning over and explaining all of the tricks. And the guy does coin in bottle, and so the bottle goes in there, the coin goes in there. There's no explanation. And he says that the girl leans over and he's like, "Well, how did he do that then?" And the guy just goes, "It's a rubber neck bottle." and she was like, "Oh, okay, that's an explanation." And that was his example of being like, it doesn't matter if their explanation for what you've just done is wrong, because they'll just go, "Oh, well, it's that anyway." Like I remember watching.
That's funny.
Flipping, like it might have been Tamaritz doing the Crystal Car on TV, and watching it with some of my lay people friends back when I was a kid. And the guy was just like, "Well, he's just in on it. The dude's just in on it. He draws the car along. He knows what the card is, and when it comes to it, he just doesn't pull it any further." And I was like, "Yeah, but that's not how it works." But it didn't matter, because without knowing, what the explanation is, you just have to take that on trust, don't you? That was fun.
I have heard some pretty funny explanations. I mean, just get on YouTube and look at the comment section.
Yeah,
for something that it's wild.
I worked on a TV show over here called Impossible. That was kind of like a magic game show. This was a long time ago as well, and it was like shot like a live show in like a nightclub in London, under the arches, under a railway line. It was great. And I worked with Peter Nardi from Alakazam, who's a great thinker and has a brilliant ability to put together routines. And he said that, like, during the performance in the evening one day, he went outside, and there was a couple of women out there smoking cigarettes, and they had an explanation for everything that had happened, but all of it relied on the idea that the person who was our host, Philip Escoffi, was just able to implant ideas in people's heads. So they kind of had concluded that they were like, we figured out how he does all of his tricks. And they kind of spotted that Nardi was behind the scenes guy. And they were like, we know how he does them tricks. We know how he does it. And he's like, oh no, maybe we've made a mistake. What? All right. How do you think he does it? Because, well, he can kind of put that idea in their head, can't he? He kind of like hypnotizes them. And it's just something he says. He makes them just say that's the card they're thinking of. And he's like, don't tell anyone.
That's the best thing to do. That is hilarious.
Yeah.
When somebody's dead wrong, I'm going to do that from now on.
I was like, yeah. What do you do when do you want people to try and figure out how you're doing what you're doing? You don't want them to come up with like a mediocre or boring explanation. You want them to be sort of like, maybe have an explanation, but also be aware that that's not quite it. That's always the place I kind of like people to. They have to investigate what's just happened in their head to understand that there's no explanation for it. So they have to be in the space of trying to think, how did that happen? And they'll come up with something, but you just want them to be in between all of these different ideas. They can't, like if you're trying to pick what to stand on a lake, like which one of these leaves is going to support my weight, none of them quite will. None of these theories actually will support what just happened. There you go.
I love it. Next time I hear somebody, come up with something outlandish, I'm like, yep, that's it. You got it. Don't tell anybody now, because, don't spoil it. You're in on it with me now, okay?
I think it was Mark Spellman had a story about performing a corporate gig for a technology company in London and doing the dice where you can tell what the color is on top.
Okay, yeah.
Cube. And so, like, some guy sidles up to him afterwards. He says, that thing that you did with the color cube earlier, and this is, it's his story. I just remember him telling it and thinking it was super funny. That thing with the color cube earlier, where you could tell what she was thinking, the color she was thinking of. And he goes, if I was going to do that, here's what I'd do. And he described how the trick works in minute technical detail. And he didn't think that that's how Mark had done it. He thought that Mark could really do that he had that psychological skill. But because this guy worked in the technology industry and he knew how to produce all of these microchips and Bluetooth, this, that, and the other, and write a JavaScript that will send this information to your Apple Watch or whatever, he just sat down and was like, oh, I bet I could do that. And that was how he came up with it. And Mark was like, well, that would be great. That's like the James Bond solution here. Let me give you this and you can think about it. And he's got like the wooden version of the dice that he gives to this guy. It goes away going like, damn. But, the stuff that we're thinking of is not like, it requires the two sides. Like it requires the technical side, like with the Mark deck. It requires you to have this thing that can sustain that performance. But it also requires you as a person to convert that pretty mundane physical object into a piece of theatre that persuades somebody that you can do this incredible thing. And that's you could sit and look at a book or study tricks.
Yeah, it really amazes me how far technology's come, especially, when it comes to methods for magic, because there's lots of, really, like you said, James Bond type of stuff out there, which just blows my mind every time I, come across it.
There's some stuff that I've been like kind of fascinated by, because I look sometimes at, I mentioned this idea that like Mark cards come from the world of gambling. So we in Magic have gone away and come up with these solutions like the ones that I've got. But meanwhile, that universe of the world of crooked gambling
Sharps
hasn't stood still. And they've got stuff that we haven't got that is completely wild in how it works. There was one that I saw, which was that they got a regular deck, and it's printed with each card is printed on the edge with an edge print with a barcode that says what the card is. And the tuck box has got like a little tiny camera in it that can, so when you shuffle the deck and put it down, the camera can see this UV light, and it can read the barcode of every single card, so it knows immediately what the stack is. So it knows how it can then use a thumper or something to tell you how you're going to play the game of poker, because it knows what card everyone's going to get, how they're going to behave, because this guy's going to fold immediately, this guy's going to choose to do this. I know that the whole card's going to be, and it gives you all of the different options. It's insane.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I've investigated it out of my price range.
Yeah, because it costs.
It's crazy.
Like $3,000 or something.
Yeah.
But fascinating that they've got this solution, and a lot of that, like they're solving a different problem. The problem they're solving is that they can't like look at it. It has to be that someone could forensically examine that deck and find nothing, because it's not worth having unless you're playing to win a lot of money. So the risk is huge. The disguise has to be incredible. Whereas something like my deck, like a gangster who's just lost $1 million in a game, you wouldn't want to give it to him and say, there you go, that's a present from me to you, because they'll come and break your legs.
Definitely not.
So it's that like the same, idea of communicating just this simple thing about what's on the card.
They'll definitely start with the hands, and the legs are next. Next game you'll be in a wheelchair,
Yeah. Somebody that I know, they got an old deck of the elites from back in the day, and they put it behind the counter in their local pub behind the bar, so that like anytime anybody in the bar is like, oh, you got a deck of cards or something, mate, and then that would be the one that would get you. So it ends up getting all gnarly and horrible, and because he knows that one day someone will be like, oh, Stephen, show us a trick. Oh, I've not got any cards with me, and he'll go, oh, I bet they got some behind the bar. And then he can perform this like ludicrous miracle. And I think that he might have ended up playing poker with him a few times as well. So
I've heard of people doing that. Where was it? I think if I'm not mistaken, it was like P3. They were talking about leaving one of these decks in a bar just for that exact reason. If I remember correctly.
That was cool.
The funny part is I've done that, but with a stack. I've left a stack or set up in somebody's house their deck that it's just ridiculous thing. Like, oh, I grab their deck secretly. I use the bathroom, and I'm in the bathroom messing with the cards, and then I come and I secretly put it back, and then like months later, I'll come back and do something. Hold on, that's your deck, right? I haven't touched it. I just got here.
Yeah.
Blow some minds
great.
that way.
Great solution. Yeah. Yeah. So it's been a bit. That was something that we came out with this like for the Kickstarter, the new duets, and that's hopefully going to be over the next month or so. And that's, like I said, this sort of evolution of this thing. But like over the last year, 2025 is probably the most like new things that I've released for me, like ever. I've got my work 2025 folder, and it's been a real busy. It's been a busy boy 2025. I've got quite a lot of stuff coming out that will be nice because we're doing Blackpool next month. Not next month. Next month. Yeah, next month.
Now you
So
did
that's
just release a deck recently with the alphabet, right? The letters on the deck,
the
correct?
scripts. Yeah.
Right, the
So
script. That's it. Yes.
that's the sort of the alphabet deck version of the duets.
Right.
And that was again like an updated version of something that I'd worked on before. These sort of marked alphabet decks. And in fact, the first marked deck that I ever did was this like word deck. So it's kind of an evolution of that idea. So we've got there we go. Look, it's a letter, just in case you guys don't know what letters look like. But with that one, I also wanted to fold in a bunch of the stuff that was in the duet. So it's got a stack, which is a weird stack. So it's got the stack marks for the position in
Interesting.
case it comes out of stack, and then it's got the card above and below marked on it. And there's a bunch of stuff that you can do with those. And I kind of like put those bits and pieces together into it to give me the option to then sit down and figure out what the application of them is going to be. Sometimes we'll do that with these prototype versions, that there'll be some feature of them that I don't necessarily have a particularly good solution or use for at the time. And you think like,
That is
over
the
the next
only
month,
one I don't have that I got to pick up. I'm so mad at myself for not getting one sooner.
it's good. I think that using a word like a letter deck is something that I really like. It's one of these things where it's quite a difficult sell unless I can demo it for somebody, because being able to do a reveal that's rather than like a royal flush or the four aces, it's somebody's name. It's basically the same trick, but because it's personal, like I
Hits
was talking
harder.
about before, it's it's using something that exists in their world rather than something that exists in your world. So like playing cards is our thing, and lay people don't know about them, and if they do know about them, they probably don't really care about them very much. So you run the risk of there being like a sort of so what element to it. Whereas with the scripts or with any alphabet deck, if you could do some kind of reveal that uses a concept from their world, it's more resonant, and I think it's a little bit sort of stronger.
I
And you
mean,
can get some
I
great
can
response.
see I can see the possibilities and mentalism there, just phenomenal. If you were, just to get a little inside information, perhaps, and reveal somebody's mother's name, or like that. When you're able to invoke that emotion from someone, the magic hits 10 times
Yeah.
harder.
Yeah, for sure. And because it's a marked deck, you can either use it to do reveals like that, or you can also use it to do like information gathering. So like names of places and words and ideas that people want to communicate. There's a way to sort of pull that information invisibly from them using the scripts. Rather than having them write it down, there's a way to use the cards to do it. It's really nice to use it. It's good fun.
Oh,
And
okay, interesting.
it's a great utility method, because anything where you want to know a place name or a word or something like that that someone's thinking of, you can kind of construct a way of doing it using the cards. It's fun. It's interesting trying to like figure out like
Now,
what the magic
with
applications.
is it also 52 cards? Is it like 26, 26, or how
No,
does that work?
we started off with a 26, 26, but what happens is like so twice through the alphabet.
Right.
That there are some words that you can't. Well, there's a lot of words that you can't spell because they have like, especially names. That's what I really wanted is that there's a lot of names that you can't spell because they have triple letters in. There'll be like three E's or
Right.
three S's or something, and the same with like places. So what we did was like figured out what I would call like a Scrabble frequency table for it, based on
Okay.
a load of text that I got. I did like an Excel spreadsheet that could figure out what the most commonly used letters are, and then biased it all towards that. So, for example, we've got three E's but only one X, because there's a lot of words that have only got three E's in, and there's not a lot of words that have got more than one X in.
Makes
So it's
sense.
that
Yeah.
like moving the numbers around like that in terms of being able to like hit as many points as possible, so that
Man,
you
I can imagine that being a very time-consuming, like tedious process coming up with that. I mean, because that's the first thing I thought is 26, 26, but then you run into, like you said, run into that issue.
it's part of the process of doing product development in any way that you have the idea and then you come up with like you'll have a prototype and then start figuring out like what the limitations are of it, what it allows, what new things it facilitates compared to previous products, but what flaws there are that you perhaps wouldn't have seen. So the very first time that we ever did any alphabet cards, which was back when I did the DMC Alphas, originally called the Sigmas, a long time ago. We did a prototype set of those, and I realized the moment they came out of the box, I took them out of the box, went to spell a word, and I realized that they weren't one-way marked on the back. So as you turn the card over, half the time it's the one way around. And it was like you would never think of it until you got it in your hands and started thinking about what the physicality of actually doing it was. And it was literally the first 5 seconds. I took them out and went, bollocks.
It's always like that, isn't it?
Yeah. So that was fun. That was a Kickstarter, and we've done all of the fulfillment for that. And hopefully, there's been a few people who got snagged with like customs, or there was fulfillment problems. We're just doing the last of those. But they're really, I think that people like using them. They're great to demo. When I went to the session earlier this month in London.
So you said that some people got their decks taken going through customs?
Well, what happened is we have now that we've gone through Brexit and we've got like occasional issues with the US customs because they've reduced this $800 de minimis exemption, which is that it used to be that any incoming shipment to the US under $800 didn't have import duty levied on it by your wonderful people there. But because anything now that comes in from the UK has, even if there's not a specific tariff attached to it, there is import tax to be paid on it. So customs take longer to do it. And if they aren't able to contact the person successfly, it will just get returned.
Back. Yeah, I actually dealt with that recently. I purchased something from Japan, and I dealt with that recently, and I was like, oh, look at this. Wow, thanks.
Yeah,
it was like half the cost of what I paid for was in. So I ended up spending $100 and then $150. So it was.
I mean, this is the
ridiculous.
The perpetual problem, isn't it? That like for my own mental well-being, I try and avoid like paying attention to politics as much as possible. But like politics is paying attention to you. Like someone's gonna out of the blue impose these like crazy like import duty. We went through Brexit, so Britain like left the EU, which was a single market. So the idea was that goods can flow with no tax, no customs really between countries. It just like it's treated as a single country. And then suddenly that ended, and it becomes very difficult for us to trade in the EU. And now it's increasingly difficult to trade with America as well.
I hope things get straightened out eventually because different countries throughout the world make wonderful, beautiful things, and I would like to enjoy those things, for sure. Without having to pay extra money.
No, absolutely. So that's all ongoing fun and games. So yeah, I'm just thinking what we've got that's coming up. We've got Blackpool, which is the world's largest magic convention, coming up in February. And we're pushing this new thing that's going to start in February, which is another sort of iteration of the Atelier Arcana that I mentioned earlier. So the Atelier Arcana idea is that we have like one customer and I work directly with them. We've come up with this idea called Atelier Circulus. And so there's like, we've got a Discord group of like subscribers, and they collectively form like the client for this project. So we're just starting that project off. So we'll just like discuss with them, like, what are we going to produce? And then every 2 months in this cycle, we spend 1 month doing the development, then 1 month me doing the design and manufacture. And so we have this cycle of going through. I'm really excited about it. Just starting off getting people into this group. So
that's a great idea to get ideas from multiple people. Talk about fast tracking research and development, huh?
Well, I think it's not so much the idea that it's going to be like I've got quite a good process. I don't need like a lot of input to just sit here and just like chew through a million ideas. But what it does allow people to do is to have, like, not everybody's going to want to have that, like the Atelier Arcana thing, because it's still quite expensive. It's a very bespoke service. And it's a compromise between that and a full commercial piece, because it will be something that's very specifically tailored to the interests of the people in the group. There'll be like thematic links, conceptual, aesthetic things that they are in charge of coming up with. So they won't. No individual person is going to have like 100% say in how it comes together. But it lets people have like access to like a really unique piece of collectible magic that will only be available to them without having to fork out the full cost of Arcana. Yeah. So that's
it's a really interesting idea. I like that.
Yeah, something that we're going to be like leaning on and pushing a little bit at the conventions and stuff from now on. But that's the I think that's like the latest thing that we're working on. I've always got like a million projects on the go in the background, which is fun and games.
So one last thing I want to ask, I guess, going from the V5s into Elysian Duet, how did this idea start? Did you just say, I really like this idea, this concept of this this optical marking system, I'm going to push it out myself? Is that kind of the idea?
There were some more things that I wanted to do with it. I like the idea of like unlocking with the actual overall aesthetics of a little bit as well, so that there's a little bit more flexibility, because previously obviously everything had to fit in with Drummond's branding, which was really nice and very successfully, I think, conveyed the vibe of his performances. But with the duets, I wanted to have this idea, which is not so much about like an individual person's. The whole work, like concept of it, is that it is this idea that when you perform like a card trick with someone, that you are performing it with them rather than just to them or for them, that you are engaging in some way in like a duet with them, and that they kind of conspire and contribute to create this moment. And that was kind of like the core like concept inside the piece. And then it all kind of came around from that. So like the Joker is two people dancing, and there's like a card reveal built into that, and it has this slightly like different aesthetic on the back, which allows some other features to work. And so it was just a case of like coming up with something which is like interesting and elegant enough to be like an attractive like item for people to carry and use, but also it's kind of got to be grey enough that like a spectator doesn't see it and goes like, damn, that's such a cool deck of cards, I've got to get one of those, just because the design is so beautiful. Because there are quite a lot of things like that where they're so like visually fascinating and idiosyncratic that people like might see them and go, I got to get that, I got to find out what that's all about. It draws a lot of attention. In fact, there's a concept that I work on a lot now with a lot of these products, that they all have what I call a disguise, that you don't want somebody to see the name of a product or a trick and then be able to Google it and find, you know. So I did a trick a while ago, which has a prop called the Psychic Game, and the presentation is about the Psychic Game. And I released it as the Psychic Game, which I then like immediately realized that if I had shown that trick to somebody, or if they'd shown it to me, the first thing that I would do would be to Google it. Not because I wanted to know how it's done, but because the prop is presented as a real thing. It's like,
I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense. It's kind of like Steve Della, who designed, created the Night Flights deck.
Yeah.
Right. So he's, the way he designed his suck case, there's no like real branding out there for somebody to pick up in visual cue. And I thought that was a really good idea, actually.
Yeah. So because of the sort of necessities of the industry, kind of wanted to, with the decks, for it to have the Elysian Duet on it. But it's designed in such a way that if that face is face down, that's the only face that's got any information about the branding on it. So you can handle it like that.
That's what I've always thought. Yeah.
Put it down, and so that's how I do it. I never show that side of it. Not like in a sneaky way like this. You just like,
nobody's going to come up and say, hey, what are these, these cards?
Yeah, they just
especially the way they're designed. Another good idea. I can't remember if it was Pig Cake or Sean Devine, or maybe I heard the idea from both of them. I'm not entirely sure, but the idea was to take, because these are so similar to like a B deck, to just take these and throw them in a B box, and nobody really is going to question or think of the difference. And I thought that was a pretty good idea.
bicycle cards have got all kinds of different things. I know that I was talking to somebody at the session who was like, "Oh, I don't carry mine in the tuck. I always just put it in a bike box."
Yeah.
And like, no one ever questions. No one's like, "That's not a rider back deck," because
Yeah.
you can get all of those in like bookstores and stuff. There's loads of like custom decks and stuff now. People just assume that that's what it is.
I mean, I've used the Maiden and Mandolin back, and I've never had anybody question, you know, is that a real, is that a bicycle? Nobody, not once.
Of course. I mean, like, I've seen a lot of magicians, like when people started performing with like custom playing cards, saying, "Oh, lay people, they can tell immediately that it's not just a regular deck of bicycles." Like lay people don't have a concept, I think, of what a regular deck of bicycles is. It's just a deck of cards. As long as it's not,
Exactly.
that's what I mean. Like, as long as it's not ultra visually distinct, I think that it will just like breeze past people. Never really,
Yeah.
and it's obviously never been a problem. Otherwise, I wouldn't have carried on with these ones.
I think that goes into the category of like magician's guilt. You know, you can throw that in that category because they're not thinking about that. They want to see, you know, they want to see your performance. They're not thinking about what deck you're using, all that. That's the things we think about. So you got to kind of get out of your
Yeah,
magician
yeah, yeah.
brain, you know.
Yeah, but I think it comes down to a lot of it though that people are learning all the time in like quite a closed environment, like I said, and it's like it's obvious once you've gone out and performed with it that that's not really how people are thinking. But if it's just you in the room with a deck of cards and you're practicing the technical aspects of it, it's quite easy to worry like what aspects of it are the things that are going to catch people's attention. Because until you've seen it happen, it could be anything, couldn't it?
Right. Yeah, I think people just need to get out and perform more. You know, get out, perform more, perform for strangers, people that you don't know. That's kind of tough, especially when you're practicing and stuff like that. You know, when you performing for people like family members or close friends, that's one thing. But when you go out and perform for real laymen, real strangers, real people you've never seen, it's a completely different ball game.
Yeah, I think so. I think that like we always just used to say, get in the trenches. That's where you're going to learn a lot. And I don't perform often enough at the moment. I know that I really like performing. And once we get into the conventions, I'll do like a million hits with all of these different things and like pin down all of the exact stuff. But yeah, it's that like until you've sat at a table with somebody and you have tried to like navigate them through the piece, you get a feeling for this bit's too wordy. It takes too long to explain that. Got to figure out a
For
simpler way of
sure.
doing this. Or go over here. Or this took too long. Can we like half the time that took? And it's just you get a feeling for it after a while, I think. But yeah, I've not really got anything extra to add to that. That was it. Just never perform. I think I've always tried to aim to have like, although I like to perform for lots of different people, I like to think of as many of the pieces that I do as almost complete performances. Enough that if I did it again for somebody who knows me, even though they kind of know where it's going, they might still find it to be like an interesting, fun, and valuable experience to see again. Like if I played you a song and sang it, like in real life, that would be a disaster. But like if I was able to do those things, like a week after I've just sung you this song, you wouldn't be like, I never want to hear that again because I've heard it
Right.
once, even though I loved it.
Right.
And I think, I try and think of like, is the trick strong enough to withstand repeated performance, not necessarily methodologically, although that is a goal, obviously. But if it's not interesting enough, if it's not interesting enough for somebody to watch twice, it might not be interesting enough for them to watch once. Do you know what I mean?
That's good advice.
I have
Yeah.
this I call it the so what principle, which is that if you got to the end of the trick and there was no trick, there was no magic reveal, there was no turn over the card, that's the card you were thinking of, would it still have been an interesting experience for the person to have done? Is it engaging enough? Is it funny enough? Does it pull on or inform some kind of idea enough? So, like, for example, I've got this like tarot thing that I do. And I think that if I got to the end of that tarot thing and there was no da-da, I don't even think people would be surprised by the lack of da-da. They just go, well, it's just a tarot thing. It doesn't need a da-da. We've talked about this aspect of my life. I used to do a piece which had like a big personality test, and it was based on what personalities people's different names tell them that they are. And I always try to build it to be interesting enough that at the end of that process, even if there was no donneur, they still feel like they've learned something, or that there was something interesting has happened for the last 4 minutes, because then you're on a really good standing, so that when there is a donneur, because we know that there is going to be a tada at the end, then it's, you know, it's double useful. Does that make sense? It's a pretty niche idea, but when you're building your own material, it's worth thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good piece of philosophy. Speaking of that, if you had to give advice to a beginner magician that is getting into magic, and I think it's tough when you are in the beginning, because I would suggest probably not using mark cards right at the beginning, and to just work on your sleights and stuff like that a little bit further, because I've seen that not go so well for others. Um, but if you had to give advice to a beginner magician and getting into using marked cards, what would you say to them?
Oh, I think that I probably would say use them, but don't use them as a method. That they are, you view it as like a
I like that.
you know, it's your emergency reserve parachute. That your main method is your main parachute.
Right.
And the reason for doing that is that what you're trying to accomplish at that stage is to acquire the mental understanding of the like performative structure of magic. There's two halves of the knowledge. That there's what you know, what you're presenting, and what they see, and they've got to learn that. But it's very nervy, and I think that beginners worry a lot about tricks going wrong. And I think that their lack of confidence and concern about tricks going wrong makes it more likely for the tricks to go wrong, because they get flustered, and then like this trick's gone wrong, and then the next trick, they're trying to get their head back in the game, but they're thinking about the last one going wrong or what could go wrong. So by having more and more safety nets, the less you're likely to need to use the safety nets. If that makes sense.
Beautifully said. I mean, I think about that all the time. It's like if I were to perform a sleight, and let's say I'm doing a control and bringing a specific card to the top, I can see, oh no, I messed up. So it gives you a heads up. So, and one of the things that I think about too is, your spectator doesn't know where it's going, so you can jazz your way into making it happen.
I used to use a lot of like for my mentalism stuff, use a lot of mnemonics, and so I'd have this thing where I would do like a book test with a dictionary, and the method is just that I've just memorized the first word on every page of the dictionary. That's just what the method was, because there was a way of doing it. And I was always very worried
That's really good though. That's
it's
really
great. It
good.
was good,
Yeah.
and I got a good way of reducing down the options, so you didn't have to do all of the pages. And I had a crib. I had like a really clever little crib that I used to use, which had the Stroop test, that the color calling thing. And it just had the crib on the back of it. So you'd say to them, I'm just going to get your head in the way, like organize your thoughts in a particular way. So you're going to have to just say the color that it's printed in, but not the color that the word says or whatever. And so I always knew that if I was doing the trick and I'm trying to remember the mnemonic and I can't get there, that I've got this like literally in my pocket to be able to just sequence into, to double check or to reinforce it. And I found that having that thing, I almost never needed to use it, because it gave me so much confidence in the performance. I wasn't stressed or worried about it anymore. And obviously that reduces your ability to do the mnemonic. So by adding the crib in to get me out of trouble, it reduced the number of times that I found myself in trouble. And I think that the marked cards can do a very similar thing, because you can bail yourself out one way or another. People used to tell me when I was starting off, carry an invisible deck with you, the ultra mental deck, Joe Berg thing, because that way, if the trick completely goes wrong and everything's just all over the floor, you can just say, right, what was the card you were thinking of? And you can then, that's the finish for the trick. That's the new finish for the trick. So you've always got.
That's my favorite use for the invisible deck, honestly.
Yeah, it's great. But it's a similar sort of thing, because once you're a little bit further into magic, if you get the mark deck, you can kind of see as things are going wrong, like live, like that's not the card that it should be.
Exactly.
You've got three aces. That's not the ace. What is the jazz move? Is the ace the next card on the top, or it's the second from the top, or how am I going to? And you can kind of resolve things that way.
Or on the bottom, second from the bottom, second from the top. It's often what it is. Yeah.
it's that kind of top-down view of the whole thing that it gives you.
Yeah.
And I think it, like, because you know that you've got that option to kind of stay on top of everything, it reduces your stress and it makes performing the things you were doing anyway slightly easier, slightly less nervy.
I completely agree with you. Spread the deck. Now it's located. We can move from there. You know,
Yeah,
especially
yeah,
if you have a deck that you can spread and still read the markings. Uh, Beautiful. I love that.
cool. Yeah, good. I'm glad.
Man, so this is we've been on here for a little while, but this has been a great interview. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me, dude. It's
You
nice talking to you.
wanna give the last word?
Yeah, like I've got loads of cool stuff on my site, phillsmithcreative.com, including the two atelier things that you guys might want to have a little look at. There's some interesting things on there, but I'll probably see a bunch of people who are watching this at Blackpool. Failing that, I'll see you next time, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely want to have you back again. This was a great conversation. You're
Cool.
just as passionate as I am about this particular subject, as you know. So,
Well, I'll try
man,
to, yeah.
thank you so much for coming on, brother. I really appreciate you.
Thanks a lot, dude.
All right, and uh, when Kickstarter coming soon, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so
And is this going to be Elysian Duets V2 or what are we?
it's the chapter 2. It's called Elysian Duets Allegro. Allegro being
Allegro.
fast.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. I
They're,
like
they're
that. Okay.
super fast to see. Yeah, that's the
All right.
concept.
I can't wait, man.
Wow,
Definitely going to do a review of them as soon as I get them in my hands.
cool. Thanks a lot.
All right, brother. Have a good one, man. Appreciate you. Stay in touch.